Hey everybody, welcome back to Electric Cafe. Today's album review is on, excuse me, Naked Eyes, 1983 self-titled debut album. Um, Most people know Naked Eyes from their couple singles they had. Always Something in There to Remind Me, and I do have Promises as well on 45. And this album was produced by Tony Mansfield, who did a lot of music producing on B-52s and excuse me, and Aha, and also was a member of New Music, which was a synth pop band in the very early 80s. One thing that's kind of surprised me from while I was doing the review on this is to see how little this album had success inside the UK. Excuse me, just drank some coffee too fast. It's strange because, this hit. I mean, this album did really fairly well in America, especially the singles. Always Something There to Remind Me, of course, is a cover song. A clever cover song. It went to number 8 in America. It went to number 59 in UK. Promises, Promises went to number 11 in UK. It went to number 95. And then it had two other top 40 songs that just made the top 40 in America, and they didn't even chart it in UK. So I just find that really strange that a UK band could hit the charts so poorly in their own country and then do so well in America. But that's 1981, 82, 83, 84 was very strong with America and this what's considered the second British invasion. I think by like 81, 82, there was a new generation of younger people, that myself included, that were really yearning for something different, something more futuristic, maybe something more catchy, more dancey than a lot of the classic rock and even disco and certain stuff that maybe a lot of people were really tired of and really wanted to see a change. And so people really gravitated towards British invasion, and I mean, I still find, I don't even know if I can see that as an excuse of why it didn't chart well in UK. It's just really odd for a band to have four top 40s and then not even have a top 40 from their own country. I just find that really interesting. It's strange how that is. I don't know. Sometimes I don't know if that's the record label. I mean, it is EMI America. I don't. I mean, EMI was pretty popular in Europe, as far as I know. I mean, I get it wasn't on like London Records or Parlophone or some of the I would imagine the bigger ones at that time in UK, but it's just strange that it didn't do that well in its own country. But yeah, they had one album after this, but it didn't do so well, and then they pretty much broke up right after that. The sound on here is obviously a synth pop. It's pretty slick over the most part. I mean, it's pretty. I think it's pretty. I wouldn't say creative, but it's pretty. I don't even know if it's really. I want to say it's really aggressive, but it's slick. It's kind of some good dance music that I think is for popular music is trying to be a little bit different and maybe a little bit more. I don't even know if I would say polished, but I think maybe just a little bit more aggressive in the beats and stuff like that. There's some really good keyboard sounds in here, like the track I Could Show You How. My favorite songs are actually also some really good catchy choruses as well, like When the Lights Go Out, Fortune and Fame. I think the lead singer's voice has a surprising good amount of soul, and the band has some surprising good funk in there too. And I think that's why I like a lot of early 80s music that kind of do this, where they have like a kind of raw beat machine or a raw dance groove or it's kind of synth pop, and then they still have like a bass player that's playing real bass and he's really funky, and I think it's a really clever combination of analog and digital and real instruments and synthetic ones. And here, like in the track "Voices in My Head," it's just the funk is undeniable. It's nice to see some funk and synth pop and new wave sounds. It's cool. Um, Obviously, probably my favorite songs are probably "Promises, Promises." That's probably my favorite song. Always something there to remind me is obviously a great song as well, a great cover song. But I think the key to this album is there's a good consistency of good secondary songs. Like "Voices in My Head," I really like. "When the Lights Go Out," both of those are singles. "Fortune and Fame" is really good. "I Can Show You How" is really good. So, right there is six of the 10 tracks are I'm mentioning right away as far as being really catchy. When I think of the individual tracks, I guess I'll go there next. Always something that remind me. Starts off great cover song. Um, I don't know if I like it as much as other people do. It's hard to deny its catchiness and it being a really clever song. I think when you have like a new style of music, or and you do a cover song and you take a song from a different style, like this would have been like a soul track, and sort of now make it a dance version. I think you'll I think there's a lot of bands that found success with that. I think of like OMD with uh what was that song they had? I'm blanking on the name. They had that one song that was like that. There was quite a few bands that sort of took an old song and made it into a 80s dance song, and it did really well. Um, I don't know why I can't think of that OMD song. It's on the '84 album. Um, Tesla Girls, not Tesla Girls. The other song on there, is it Tesla Girls? Yeah, maybe it's Tesla Girls. Um, God, I want to think it's on the album that Tesla Girls. Oh, Locomotion. Yeah, Locomotion. So, they had a good hit with that. Not as big as always something to remind me, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head. But I know there's a lot of ones out there that were remade into dance songs. I just can't think of any top of my head yet this morning. But always something there to remind me. 3.5 stars. Very good track for sure. Fortune and Fame. It has a little bit of an Italo disco sound to it. Which is interesting. I don't know if that was meant to be, but it does kind of have like a little bit of a post disco sound on there. Fortune and Fame, though, really cool track. I got 3 stars. When the lights go out, solid, really good track. 2 3/4 stars. Voices in My Head, probably my second or third favorite. 3.25 stars. And Low Life is not bad too. It kind of comes down a little bit from the next 4 tracks. Ends the first side of the album. 2.25 stars. Maybe not as good as some of the other tracks, but still worthy, and still a good track for sure. Promises starts off the second side. It's just probably my favorite track. I love the keyboard line in the chorus. Um, the hook and the bridge are excellent. That's what make the track for me. Those 3 things: the hook, the bridge, and the keyboard line in the chorus. Those 3 things are just phenomenal. It really I was kind of bordering on 3.5, 3.75 stars, and the way it ends and those particular parts, it just kind of wins you over in the end. And I gave it 4 stars. I think it's an excellent track, but I was being pretty picky on it, and not just obviously giving it a straight 4 and sort of almost trying not to, in a way. I was like, is this song really an excellent song? I can't knock it. It's always been a favorite of mine, and I'm not a huge Naked Eyes fan. I kind of bought this because I didn't have Voices in My Head on vinyl, and I had Naked Eyes Promises, Promises here. So um, I was pleasantly surprised when I bought this album some, I don't know, 20 years ago or so, about the consistency of the album. I could show you more, or I could show you how. 2 3/4 2, solid, really good track. Probably my least favorite track on here, and well, actually, two of my three least favorite tracks are right at the end here. Emotion in Motion, track number 8, longest track on the album. I think it's probably the weakest. It just doesn't really do too much for me. I gave it a star and a half. Burning Bridges, it's strange because this one always. I feel like this one, I heard this somewhere recently, and I didn't remember it was a Naked Eyes track, but it must have been playing in the background somewhere, and I was like, oh, this is a good track, and I didn't think too much of it, and then I heard it, replaying it, and I forgot how much I like this track. The chorus is really catchy. The keyboard stabs and the levels. The keyboard stabs and the levels in the track, they aren't that great. They're kind of a little rough, and this track does sort of remind me of Ultravox a little bit, but the chorus is really catchy. Give it 2.5 stars. And then Could Be, the last track, which is the shortest track. I gave it 1.5 stars. It's got a rough production, maybe not the best way to end the album. It's just an indifferent track. I do have a note on here that it has one of the loudest snares ever recorded in a synth pop song. Just this album has a little bit of a rough recording to it, and that's kind of where I have a little bit of the drawback on the album. The opportunities for the album, just the overall sound has kind of a hazy, thin sound to it. It's just really not ideal. It's almost sounding like it's in a tunnel. You can't hear the hi-hats really at all in here. The beats aren't really that deep. You know, they are for the most part a drum machine, from what it sounds like. It's just maybe not recorded all that great. It is kind of, again, really kind of thin. So that's a little bit of a drawback, but it's not big because, it's 1982, 83, and I find a lot of the albums that were recorded in that time to be very lackluster and recorded and mixed and mastered. There's just a lot from that period that's just one of the three, if not two of the three, if not three of the three, whether it's recorded not that great, whether it's mixed not that great, and whether there's some strange choices on what's prominent in the mixes. Like here is that track number 10, that snare is really loud. And then also the mastering, just the overall volume is fairly low, which is interesting because you would think by like 1982, like tape saturation and sort of pushing the envelope on volumes that they've sort of, on processes and recording processes that they've sort of perfected, in my opinion, sort of by the middle 80s, you would think, if it's analog, especially the early 80s, you would think that they sort of perfected like tape saturation and sort of pushing the envelope when you're going to go to vinyl. And it just must have been something with the people that pressed these records that, I get it. There's 25, 30 minutes on some sides of the records, and so the volume at 33 RPMs isn't going to be that dynamic or that loud, but it seems like you can still press a lot. It's just a lot louder and sort of, it just must have been something that these producers were very much going, well, especially on records, very much to the T, like, and not going overboard, or I don't know how many. I mean, I would imagine back in those days that there was more people pressing records than it was today. Actually cutting the records, because vinyl was the main source of physical music. But it's just strange. I don't know if you guys have any opinions on why the mastering and levels were so low. I know mastering was a lot different in the early 80s than it was in the later 80s, and especially in the 90s and 2000s. Especially with digital mastering coming on board in probably the maybe late 80s, and everybody using it by the 90s, but just opportunities, you know. And I say that because it's more about the dynamics and a little bit of the volume, but it's more about the dynamics and some of the mixing, and because I generally don't like things that are mastered crazy loud and you know, almost ear piercing and really hard to play at lower volumes because it still sounds loud, and that's the issue with a lot of newer mastering is you can't play it at low volumes and you still kind of feel like it's distant. It still makes you feel like you want to turn it down. It's just made to be played. It's not even made to be played loud. It's just it's made to stand out, you know, volume wise against other stuff, and I think that's a really poor strategy, and it hurts everybody else because the idea is not to be loud. Who's the loudest, right? I think the ideal thing should be who should be recorded the best, or who should have the best song, or who have the best instrument playing on this particular record. Like the goal of to be the loudest album out there is just, you know, it's ruined a lot of potential good records, and it's kind of hurt the industry a lot, and unfortunately made a lot of people probably hurt their ears. But I digress. The other opportunity for this album is the ballad, which is Emotion in Motion, is not really a great ballad song. It's kind of there's really not a different track on here that's kind of is a change of pace track, or kind of balancing out the album and it kind of being straightforward synth pop. It'd be nice if there was maybe a different song in here. I don't know what that is, but I know there's not a ballad in here that's really worthwhile, and you know, maybe that's the opportunity, or just a change of pace or something different on here. But it's consistent on what it does, no doubt. And again, the levels aren't great on the mix, so those are kind of the opportunities. But I do have the album 27 out of 27 stars divided by 10, which is a 2.70, which is a solid album. Overall, it's a 65 out of 100. I think it's right in the middle between good and very good. Very solid album. Yeah, if you know the tracks on here, the main tracks on here, and you're into synth pop or new wave, I would still urge you to check the rest of the album, and I think you'll be surprised by the level of dance music, the level of funk, some good soulful singing, some good catchy choruses, and you know, maybe just not the best recorded production, but you know, I think it's a solid early '80s synth pop album for sure. But yeah, 65 out of 100 for Naked Eye's debut album. Curious to know what your thoughts are. What is your favorite track? This is mine. Promises, Promises. Such a classy track. It's so smooth too, and it's a nice mix of synth pop and sort of like a little bit of soul in there. You know, I don't know if I'd really say it's blue-eyed soul because it's not like crooning, or it's kind of more towards dance music, but just really smooth tracks. And I really like Voices in My Head is really cool as well. Those are probably my two favorite tracks. I do really respect the quality cover song that always on my mind. I almost said always on my mind. Always something there to remind me. I really respect that track. But again, it's one of those tracks that it was played so much on the radio that it's just sometimes it's hard to gauge those tracks because they're so recognizable. It's just it's one of those ones where it's just like, yeah, it's 3 stars. I don't think anybody would give it under a 3 stars. Yeah, there's some people who would probably say it's a 4-star track. For me, it's kind of like, I think because it was played so much and so recognizable that it almost draws it back a little bit, and which I don't know if it's totally fair by me doing that, but it's just I feel like sometimes, I think the opposite of that is it was played so much that it becomes a catchy track and becomes a familiar track and maybe becomes a good track because it was played so much. I think you could do that with a lot of these tracks and it would be equal to that in a way. So I kind of sometimes go in the middle of my thoughts on that and said, could it be a four track? Sure. I think, me personally, I think it's a 3-star track. I put it in the middle of 3.5 stars. That's kind of how I kind of decide that because it's really hard to gauge some of those really popular tracks that you kind of grew up with, but you're not a huge fan of, but you really respect and you don't mind anytime it's played. You also don't really care if it's ever not played again. You know what I mean? Like you know what I mean? It's like it's a good track. It sounds me funny saying that, but it's just there's. I'd rather hear 4 other tracks on here than hear that track because it's been played so much in my life, and especially like me coming from like a DJ's perspective, like you mentioned 80s tracks, and if somebody's gonna play a Naked Eyes track, they're probably gonna play always something to remind me, but I always play Promises if I have to play something that's recognizable from here. But if I get the opportunity, I'm playing Voices in my head because that track's jamming. All right, thanks so much. Curious if you have any thoughts or opinions on this album, and should I review their second album? That would be the question I have. I don't have the second album. I've never heard the second album. I'm wondering if it's worthwhile checking out. But yeah, be curious your thoughts on Naked Eyes as a band, and what would you rate this album? All right, thanks so much.